Following is a multimedia presentation that is a supplement to the Sustainable Country Living book. The topic is the Information and Financial Grids, which dovetails with Chapter 20, Information Grid, and Chapter 21, Financial Grid. When we think of grids, we think of the power grid. And if you're off-grid, it means you're not connected to the power grid. But technically, there are grids for everything that you end up purchasing. Not only power, but heat, and in this case, information and financial grids. So we're going to take a look at these two grids in this presentation. First of all, there is the issue of universal identification.
My fingerprint, my face, the way I move, all of these can be turned into unique biometrics and be used to identify me.
Biometric systems can recognize a person's specific physical attributes, their fingerprints, facial features, iris, or retina. The technology is already used around the world by the Somali army, Indian doctors, and for authenticating patients for important drugs, or for online banking on smartphones. There are even systems that look under your skin, so to speak, such as infrared scanners that are used in vein matching. Oxygen-poor blood in veins absorbs more infrared light than surrounding tissue, so that vein patterns can be matched. Scientists are currently developing technology that can recognize a person on the basis of their heartbeat. Others are working on identifying a person by their brainwaves.
So you can see universal identification can be done with a fingerprint, a face print, even your movements as you walk. They create a unique biometric of who you are. Additionally, there can be iris scans by scanning the back of your eyes and infrared patterns of the heat signature of your body. China is probably the most advanced in terms of this kind of surveillance, and China's social credit system is famous for gathering data of their citizens.
You may have heard of it. It's called the social credit system. By all indications, it's the future of that country. If we are not careful, it may be our future here. I'm drawing this to your attention because I left China to get away from the all-seeing eye of the Chinese government. I fled to the West in search of freedom. I found it. But now I'm seeing troubling signs that remind me of what I left behind. The loss of freedom doesn't happen overnight. The Chinese social credit system has been decades in the making. It was okay at first. These things always are. Throughout the 1990s, Chinese banks developed financial credit rating programs like those we have in America to increase lending in rural areas. So far, so good. But the government officials soon realized that similar programs could be set up to gather other information about the behavior of its citizens. By 2014, new technology allowed the state to monitor what people said, did, bought, read, and searched on the internet. Why? Because more data equals more control. That year, the State Council, China's highest administrative body, issued a blueprint for Phase 1 of the social credit system. The central government then established pilot programs in 43 cities across the country. In one of these cities, Rongcheng, local officials labeled certain behaviors as either acceptable or unacceptable. Every adult was assigned 1,000 social credit points. They gained or lost points depending on how well their public and private lives conformed to government standards. Buying diapers was fine. You are taking care of your family. Playing video games questionable because the state says it has a sign of laziness. And discussing religion or grumbling about state policy, unacceptable. Lose too many points and you might miss out on privileges like bank loans, faster internet, and plane tickets. Big companies such as Alibaba work with the government to make the system viable. Imagine the government knows and judge what you buy on Amazon, and you get the idea. It's assumed that in the near future, the system will be mandated for all Chinese citizens. Already, many people have been enrolled without their knowledge. Some in China think that social credit system promotes good behavior, addressing everything from crime to bad driving and financial delinquency. But the system doesn't stop there. It hasn't taken Chinese authorities long to draw up massive blacklists for those deemed unacceptable. According to The Guardian in England, there are 23 million Chinese on those lists, and the number is growing. One of them, Liu Hu, is a journalist who published articles exposing government corruption and censorship. The system banned him from flying, traveling on a train, buying property, and taking out loans without any due process. The Muslim Uyghurs of Xinjiang have seen even worse. Many have been sent to re-education camps for unacceptable behavior. With examples like these, it isn't hard to envision a time when loyalty to the Chinese government will determine all aspects of its citizens' lives, where they live, where they work, and where their kids go to school. Everything we see in China, we are starting to see here in the West. Australia, Austria, and even the US have imposed or attempted to impose mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations. Government officials openly pressure banks not to give loans to disfavored businesses like oil companies. Parents who protest what their kids are learning in government schools are labeled domestic terrorists.
So this authoritative rule in China, can you see how this kind of population control could pave the way for the mark of the beast from the Bible prediction, and how the faithful could be singled out so they couldn't buy or sell? It's not just China. We as Americans are voluntarily giving our personal data through our phones and other methods.
We are actually surveilling ourselves. We're doing a lot of the collection that we used to imagine would be the government as individuals. We go around, we take selfies, we photograph each other, we upload things to the internet. Other things are being collected on us, for example, video cameras, locational data on our cell phone. And all of this winds up in what they call the cloud, which is the servers which maintain all of this data. And so the person who operates the server can look all across these various uploads and construct a very accurate picture of everything we do every day. And that is why we have actually become little brother in the place of big brother.
You argue that the privacy ship has essentially already sailed, and that it's really autonomy we should worry about. Explain that concept.
Privacy means to most of us keeping things hidden behind closed doors or a private conversation. And what I've seen over the last several years is so much data is generated by us unwittingly that the idea that we're going to keep things behind closed doors really has become almost quaint. So now the question is, what happens when the data is generated? Do we have some control over it? And that, I think, is where the battleground is in terms of our freedom. Because if people have a 100% view of everything that we do all the time, then the ability to manipulate us and coerce us becomes a real issue.
So collection of personal information, can you see how this kind of data collection could pave the way for the mark of the beast, and how the faithful could be singled out so they couldn't buy or sell? The Last Day Events book, page 148, says, "In the last great conflict, in the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell." The same book says on page 149, "For fear of wanting food and clothing, they will join with the world in transgressing God's law." But according to the Bible, this battle over the mark of the beast is not about the kind of physical things that we're talking about. It's not the lack of privacy, population control, or social credit profiling. It's not cell phone tracking or GPS location or cell tower triangulation. It's not travel monitoring by the use of license plate scanning on the highways. It's not personal data collecting, such as social media data retrieval. It's not smart home devices that monitor what's going on in your homes. It's not security cameras, Wi-Fi streaming. It's not even land taxes. Because when you can't buy or sell, what are you going to do with your land taxes, even if you're debt-free? The Bible says in Revelation 13:11-15, the final battle will be over worship. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So let's review some of the ways that our freedoms and our financial stability and our information has been jeopardized historically. Back in 1933, there was a rash of bank closures after the Depression.
The economic hardships brought on by the Great Depression had reached a pinnacle by the spring of 1933. On March 4th, an unprecedented event had occurred. Each and every bank had closed its doors. For some, this measure was only temporary, but for a large number, the economic crisis was a permanent reality. The banking system was near collapse. A quarter of the labor force was unemployed, and prices and production were down by a third from their 1929 levels.
So in 1933, there were bank closures. The Great Depression resulted in every bank closing, and the banking system was near collapse. Then in 2008, the stock market crashed.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Two-year no yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
On the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow, not so focused on OPEC. Yes, OPEC did cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day.
Really, you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors.
We've had an 8-day losing streak in the Dow that in percentage terms puts it on par, close to that percentage loss those 2 days in 1929.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria, which was briefly suspended earlier on in the day, is down by nearly 11%.
This market is as volatile as you'll ever see.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it. The movement in oil prices so fast, so fast.
Seconds ago until the start of trading at the New York Stock Exchange, and stocks are set to kick off lower, a whole lot lower.
eBay is down 6.5%, and really you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors. Apple's under pressure, Yahoo down 8.5%, Cisco 6.5%, Research in Motion 10%.
This could be the most serious recession in decades. And that means life, as most Americans know it, is about to change, in some cases dramatically.
So in 2008, it was the worst day on Wall Street since 1987. The worst weekly point drop in history, and it impacted the whole world. Then there was the issue of the banks closing in Greece.
There is high anxiety in Greece tonight, where banks will not open tomorrow and restrictions have been placed on withdrawals. Greece faces a deadline Tuesday to pay more than $1.7 billion to international creditors, something that likely will not happen. Here's Elizabeth Palmer.
Long lines formed at ATMs of Greeks who want their money now before the banking system goes into meltdown. But the rush has drained the machines. Nikos tried 10, he says, with no luck. Today, Sunday, is a day of rest. But Greeks are braced for the worst tomorrow, when the government ordered banks to stay closed to avoid a full-scale panic. The Greek Prime Minister has appealed for calm. Your deposits, he told the country on national television, are safe. The crisis boils down to this. Greece is broke, and can't pay its international debts. Europe will bail it out and let Greece keep using the European currency if the government cuts spending and raises taxes. But Greek people are already hurting from salary and pension cuts. The politicians, unwilling to inflict more pain, have now voted to put the whole thing to a referendum. Confused? Well, so are the Greeks. I have no idea what we'll be voting for, says Triandafila Borbuda. We shouldn't even be in this mess. But now they are in. The way out looks even messier.
We're now in uncharted waters, Jeff, and Greeks are very worried. They're even hearing rumors that they won't be able to carry out very basic and necessary financial transactions, including using their debit and their credit cards.
So, Greek bank closures. The banks closed. There were restrictions on withdrawals. There were fears of no access to credit or debit cards, and the government was no help. Elon Musk warns about the federal debt.
Because we've spent so much money, it's like the federal budget deficit is insane. It's like $3 trillion federal expenditures are $7 trillion, federal revenue is $4 trillion. That's a $3 trillion difference in, if this was a company, it'd be a $3 trillion loss. So I don't know if we should be adding to that loss. That seems pretty crazy. Something's got to give. You can't just spend $3 trillion more than you earn every year and don't expect something bad to happen. I think, this is not good. The deficit is more than $3 trillion when you look at the future obligations. So it's $7 trillion of current expenditures, but it's much more than that if you look at future obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. So we're running this incredible deficit. Something's got to give.
So Elon Musk warns that we have an incredible federal deficit. Something's got to give, he says. And as you know, he's working on changing that right now. The U.S. debt crisis.
The U.S. is facing a perfect debt storm. High spending, low revenues, and rapidly increasing borrowing costs. Historically, they've been able to navigate through tough financial situations, mostly thanks to the dollar's dominant position in markets. But this time, it's different. If the trend continues without major reforms, even a financial powerhouse like the US could find itself in deep trouble paying back investors. In 1980, the US national debt per household was around $39,000. Now, in 2024, it's over $260,000 per household, or $484,000 per child. At the time of writing, the US debt has surpassed the staggering $35 trillion mark. That's $10 trillion more since 2020. This year alone, the US will spend over $1 trillion on just the interest payments alone. That's more than its defense budget and almost the GDP of Switzerland. So why is this a big deal? Well, it's because this isn't just a number on a ledger, nor just some wild facts. It's a very real problem and represents a mounting challenge to future generations. And it's not just America that's at risk. The exponential US debt is a crisis for the future global economy.
The US is in a debt storm. The national debt is equal to $260,000 per household, over $1 trillion on interest alone. The mounting challenge is for future generations, and it will have a global impact. Then there is Bitcoin cryptocurrency.
As Bitcoin nears a bullish engulfing pattern for the first time in 18 months, there's growing optimism for its long-term outlook. Yet, this rise also signals potential volatility ahead, echoing Whitney Webb's concerns about the future of finance. With Bitcoin's open interest surging to $35 billion, it's clear that the futures market is playing a significant role. However, despite this surge, flat funding rates suggest that perpetual traders are still hesitant. Webb warns that while Bitcoin's rise reflects market dynamics, it also foreshadows a larger shift, one that could lead to financial systems controlled by a few powerful players. The combination of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and digital IDs threatens to erode privacy, setting up a future where surveillance and centralized control reign supreme. As institutions tighten their hold on digital assets, Bitcoin's current market movements might just be the beginning of a transformation that sees financial freedoms diminished. With technical indicators hinting at short-term corrections and spot traders aggressively selling into resistance, the future of decentralized finance remains uncertain, dominated by forces far beyond mere market cycles.
So Bitcoin is volatile. It's leading towards finances controlled by a small group. The central bank digital currency and digital IDs all play into this. Privacy is threatened. Surveillance and control is part of that. And the financial freedoms that we may enjoy are diminishing. There appears to be a planned overhaul of the global financial system.
The future isn't just on the horizon, it's already here, and it's far more unsettling than you might think. The essential pieces for a radical overhaul of the global financial system, stablecoins, tokenized deposits, and public-private partnerships are quietly being set into place. But what's missing? A trigger. In a revealing conversation with James Patrick, investigative journalist Whitney Webb warns of a looming threat, which is the central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Once they're fully implemented, the idea of financial privacy may become a thing of the past. Tied to digital IDs, these currencies would allow governments and corporations to monitor every transaction, tracking your every move. Under the guise of protecting against money laundering or fighting terrorism, these systems could enable unprecedented levels of state surveillance over the financial activities of ordinary citizens. What's worse, CBDCs won't replace the traditional banking powers, they'll strengthen them. Institutions like JP Morgan and Citigroup are already making strategic moves with stablecoins and tokenized deposits, positioning themselves at the forefront of this new reality. In short, the future of finance is closer than you think, and it's designed to benefit the powerful while placing your freedom at risk.
So we can see this planned overhaul of the global financial system is a looming threat. The CBDC, central bank digital currency, is in the middle of this trend. It's quietly being set up to control. There'll be no more financial privacy. We'll all have digital IDs. They can track our every move. They can track all of our transactions. It allows for government surveillance, and our freedoms are at risk. Then there's the CIA bank cyber hacks.
There's essentially a consensus that some other very significant financial crisis is in the cards for the next several years. And if you are the big banks and you know that's going to happen, you probably want to avoid a scenario like what happened in 2008, where the public knew that you were the source of the malfeasance and the economic problems, which of course spawned movements like Occupy Wall Street. If you want to avoid that, what is the best way to absolve yourself of any sort of blame for mismanaging or losing people's money? If you can say that hackers took it, then you're totally absolved, and whoever the hackers are the ones to blame. And U.S. intelligence, or really any intelligence agency today, can frame anyone they want for a cyber attack. We know this from one of the last WikiLeaks releases called Vault 7, where it revealed that among the CIA's hacking tools were the ability to place the fingerprints of adversary states, or really any group they wanted, into hacks that were actually conducted by the CIA itself.
The banks were blamed for the catastrophe in 2008, but the banks don't want to get the blame for the next bank-created crisis, so they can blame hackers. So the CIA can frame anybody for a cyber attack, and that plays into the ability for the banks to push off the blame for the next crisis in the finances onto hackers when it could actually be orchestrated by the banks and the CIA. Digital controls.
One of the reasons they want this new system that ultimately amounts to a control system is because they see it as the ultimate form of risk management. So you surveil them constantly. You can turn their money on and off. You can turn their access to services and really anything else on and off as well under the digital ID functionality. a way to keep people in line in a way that didn't exist in, feudal Europe and under that model. But they're clearly moving to that model.
This is a new system of control. It provides surveillance. It has the ability to turn money on and off, control the access to services. It incorporates a digital ID, and it's a way to control, to keep people in line, just like in China. So what about storing gold and silver? Dave Ramsey is considered the guru of financial advice, and somebody called in and asked that question, and he had an interesting response.
Hi, Dave. I am retired, and I have 10% of my retirement in gold and silver, bullion, and coin. And my question is, with the disruptions in the economy due to inflation, the Fed move, the Ukraine war, and possible conflict with China in the future, should I be invested in gold and silver? And if not, is there an alternative?
Well, I'm 61, and I have a net worth of several $100 million, and I have zero invested in gold and silver. And so and the problem is that gold and silver are not necessarily what people will run to unless they're just afraid or greedy, one of the two. In other words, a failed economy that would rely on gold and silver will, before it relies on that, will turn into a barter economy. So, the only way that, gold and silver does not have intrinsic value. It has absolutely no value except what someone else will pay you for it. Gold or green presidents' faces on paper don't have any value except what someone else will trade you for it. And so that's how exchange or currency works. It's when we, as a society or as a group of people, agree that something has value. We agree that little shiny clear rocks have more value than the rocks in our driveway, and we call them diamonds. But it actually has no difference. They're both a little rock. We just decided as a society or a culture that but there's nothing that automatically means that diamonds have value. They don't. It's only because someone else wants them that they have value. And green paper doesn't have value. It doesn't. It's only that someone else wants it that makes it have value. So all of that to say, anytime you're investing in a commodity because you're worried about world affairs or stupidity on a global scale or whatever it is, you're really not accomplishing what you hope to accomplish there. If and so you kind of got to go extreme before these things happen. And if you believe that America as we know it is getting ready to implode, which is not what you said, but for those of you out there that believe that, then gold is really not where you would put your money. You should put your money in water bottles of water, bullets, blue jeans, and gasoline.
Practical things.
Because these utilitarian things are the first things that happen in a completely devastated society. You start fresh. And so, you could trade a gallon of gas where there is no gas for almost anything. It becomes like gold.
So what happens, you end up trying to trade your gold bar for a gallon of gas.
It won't work.
I would add one more thing regarding gold and silver, thinking of Dave Ramsey's comment. It might be wise to own some gold or silver coins to have stashed away for when times get tough. It wouldn't be from an investment point of view. It would be from a protection in the future point of view. On the other hand, Dave Ramsey had a really good point that how valuable will gold and silver be when people need food and gasoline when times are tough? So should we have gold and silver? But let's look at what the Bible says. 1 Timothy 6:17-19. Charge them that are rich in this world, that they are not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. They that do good, they that be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate, laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. So you'll notice here that it isn't a problem to be rich, it's a problem to be rich and be selfish. God gives you your riches, and you can do good with them while you have the opportunity. God gives us richly all things to enjoy. We don't need to trust in uncertain riches. We can lay up and store a good foundation against the times to come. James 5 verses 2 and 3 says, "Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasures in the last days." So you can see that if in the last days you are stockpiling things selfishly and not being willing to help others, that it could be to your demise in the last days. So what do we take away from all of this? Well, first of all, it's my opinion that God wants us to move in the country, to be self-sustaining, and to be independent as possible when need be of the world's services, so we can be prepared for uncertain times. And that could be natural or man-made disasters, or we know prophetically there will be a time, if we're faithful, we won't be able to buy or sell. So to have a plan to be independent of those services and be able to be self-sustaining would be very advisable and in keeping in God's plan. But we need to be compassionate and not be selfish. If you are building your country property and stockpiling things selfishly, and you're not thinking of how can I do this in tough times to help others that maybe didn't have the abilities or the foresight, and to help those in need around them, and you're just doing it selfishly for you and your family, then maybe you're no better than a doomsday prepper. But we need to be planning, we need to follow the counsel and move out of the cities and be independent of the world system as much as possible, have gardens and all of that. But at the same time, have one eye on the possibility of how can I use these blessings God has given me to be able to help others when times get tough. So we need to pray about what we need to do to prepare, and maybe have a mixture of some emergency stash of money or coins, and then also have materials that we might not be able to get when times are tough, but not do it selfishly. To be aware of new videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the Preparing for the Time of Trouble channel. For more free videos and downloadable audio podcasts, as well as handouts, go to www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Topic categories include recordings of live seminar presentations, country living, sustainable gardening, homestead remedies, how to be self-sufficient when the grid goes down, wild edible and medicinal plants, hydrotherapy, and end-time Bible prophecies. To take advantage of these free resources, go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com.